Hey, Slider Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the future of the Democratic Party, and it looks bleak. It's also our first look at the 2022 midterms. So every president has an official portrait that is painted of them, and they're all pretty much the same, right? Every president, they're like standing there and they got a coat on, and that's pretty much everyone, right? They really started to stink, though, in terms of quality with JFK, right? JFK was the first portrait that was different, right? A different color scheme, and he's looking down, he's not looking at you. But then after that, the quality just, it's like we forgot how to paint. This is Reagan's portrait. It's just like if you look close, like it's just not good. And then this is the one of George W. It looks like he painted it. And then Obama's is the worst of all, of course, right? Looks like he's coming out of a bunch of weeds behind him. And then Michelle's is even worse than that. Like, what is that? Like some high schooler drew that. But it's all very hip. The whole thing's very hip. But anyway, Biden's official portrait, yet to be unveiled. But surely it will be inspired by scenes like this. He will have the first presidential portrait of a president's back. Now, every president has been seen and videoed walking away from the camera, going to Marine One or Air Force One or whatever. But it seems like no other president has ever walked away from the cameras and from reporters and from the American people and from a crisis and from a moment that demands leadership like Joe Biden has this last year. Does that make sense? Like every president has to walk to the helicopter. But I don't remember a president walking to the helicopter at the worst moments, at moments when it demands leadership. When he walks away from the importance of the moment. Moments like when Kabul was falling. Do you remember? And people were literally clinging to the wheels of the airplanes as they took off from the airport, and they'd let go and they'd fall from the sky. People so desperate to leave, knowing that they're going to get killed by the Taliban. And do you remember our president's flippant response to that?
But we've all seen the pictures. We've seen those hundreds of people packed into a C-17. We've seen Afghans falling.
That was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
What did you think when you first saw those pictures?
That was 4 or 5 days ago, man. What are you even talking to me about? First of all, it was like 1 or 2 days before he said that. But whatever. Even if it was 4 or 5 days, right? That's what I mean. That's a turning his back moment. Why even worry about it? It's 4 or 5 days ago. Let's turn our backs on that moment, right? Scenes of reporters being aggressively ushered out of the room, feeds cut off at weird times, like the president gives this weird address or something in a set, right? They don't do anything in the Oval Office anymore. For the first time I've ever seen, they set up a set that looks like the Oval Office, which is kind of weird too. And they'll do a thing and then they cut the feed off. Questions not being answered when clearly they should. Here's a weird moment where Joe Biden's eye filled up with blood. Let's just ignore that. And then you get moments like this.
And when will Americans get those free COVID tests? We have confidence in myself. Thank you very much.
Are you going to break up the big four meat packers, Mr. President?
All right, guys.
Thanks, guys.
We have confidence in your COVID team. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
See, that's just weird, isn't it? It's just weird the way he's sitting there, just ignoring it all. It's weird, but it's more than weird. It's inept. It's insulting. He's the commander-in-chief. He's the president of the United States, but we knew, well, most of us, you and I knew, that this is what it would be, right? He didn't even campaign. They were afraid to put him in front of a camera during the entire campaign. Can he even fulfill his basic functions as a person? Every once in a while, someone on CNN or somewhere will be brave enough to say, I think the president is a little confused. They'll just kind of like throw it out there a little bit and see when it will take. Yeah, he's confused. He's senile. He can't think clearly. Everyone knows it. The left is just waiting for the right time to throw him to the curb absolutely throw him to the curb and forget that his, 70 years in D.C. ever even happened. The problem for the Democrats is that the backup person to the presidency, the vice president, is maybe the only person in politics who's liked less than Joe Biden. And that, of course, being the one and only Kamala Harris. So what are the Democrats to do? Think about this. Think of the alternative. Like, it would be a very different dynamic if the vice president was an impressive person. Like, think about that. What if the vice president was the next person, like the big up-and-coming Democratic superstar? Then you'd be like, oh, well, the Democrats could have some hope, right? Biden doesn't finish his term, and the new VP's there, and they love him, and it's great. But it's not. It's Kamala Harris. No one likes Kamala Harris. That's not the situation with the Democrats. They're in big trouble, and they know it. Which is why every once in a while they float out Pete Buttigieg as the next candidate, whatever. Right? That's how pathetic the Democrat bench is right now. Pete Buttigieg is the best they have. Surely someone from the left will have to fill that void in 2024, right? Maybe Gavin Newsom, governor of California, maybe. But that's people. Let's talk policy-wise for 2022. They got nothing. The Democrats are the party of lockdowns and shutting down schools and vaccine passports. That's the Democrats. Lockdown, shut down school, vaccine passports. Is that a winning campaign? Is that a winning strategy? Maybe in California, maybe in New York City, Chicago, nowhere else, not nationwide. Here's one of Biden's big promises, of course, that he made during the whole campaign.
What happened to 2 months ago when you were talking declaratively about I am going to shut down the virus?
I'm going to shut down the virus.
I'm not going to shut down the country. I'm going to shut down the virus.
I'll shut down the virus, not the economy.
What I would say is I'm going to shut down the virus, not the country. I'm going to shut down the virus.
I'm not going to shut down the country, but I'm going to shut down the virus. I'm going to shut down the virus.
Once we shut down the virus,
I'm going to shut down the virus.
I'm going to shut down the virus. Anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain as president of the United States of America.
But they won't stop. They can't stop. Here's Biden just the other day.
And for parents with kids too young to be vaccinated, surround your kids with people who are vaccinated.
I love that, right? Keep your kids away from the dirty, unvaccinated lepers. Keep them away from the unvaccinated. Amazing. I don't know where we are as a country right now, to be honest. I don't know where the American people are. It's an interesting mix across the whole country, right? I'm excited to get the take from our next two guests and get their assessment. I trust their assessment. I'm in California. I don't have any hope for California. There's no hope for California. I was just in Georgia. That's a totally different country. I hope the people of America have a greater love of freedom than the people in charge. I hope, still, I hope the American people will rebuke the party that's in charge right now coming up at the end of this year. Inflation's going to get worse every month. The economy is going to get worse. No matter how many times the Barbara Streisands of the world parrot the White House and talk about how things have never been better. It's the best economy ever. Like, what are you talking about? The only hope the left has is that, politically, is that the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, and then there'll be a big push for reproductive rights, right? From just the absolutely hysterical feminist left is going to freak out and be like, you have to vote for the Democrats because they want to take away a woman's right to whatever, right? But I don't even know if that's a huge political winner as much as the left thinks it is. So I'm not sure what the Democrats have, and they're scared. There's no question about it. But quite frankly, we should all be a bit concerned because Biden's been president for 1 year. 1 year. Look at the damage that's been done in 1 year. How much can be done in the next? How much can be inflicted on this country before even this next election, let alone 2024? Coming up next, our friend John Phillips is going to be here, give his assessment of the Democratic Party. Who's up next for the Democrats? Who's up next for the Republicans? Right? DeSantis, of course, but who else? And then we're going to talk with the great Josh Hammer about the social credit system that countries are currently implementing. Right? They currently exist in other countries. Wait until you see what they're doing in England right now, and will it come here? Or will the American people put a stop to all this dystopian nonsense from our European elites? That's all coming up next. Mike Slater, spread the word.
Now we look at 2022. I want to tell my Republican friends, get ready, pal. You're going in for a problem. And we need to stay unified.
Yeah, get ready, Bal. Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special. Biden's uphill battle, getting ready for 2022. Just getting a good assessment of the current state of of both parties, quite frankly. Our friend John Phillips is here from KABC and also a writer at the Orange County Register. John, how are you, brother?
I'm good, but I'm trying to figure out who he was talking to there, us or the ghost of Corn Pop.
Wow, I haven't thought of Corn Pop in forever. Bal. Hopefully he was more intimidating than that attempt to be. What is the current state of the Democratic Party, John?
Well, everything you need to know happened in that Let's Go Brandon video that we all saw on Christmas Eve when the father pranked him and said, "Let's go Brandon" at the end. Joe was totally clueless and had absolutely no idea what that meant. But you could tell that Jill Biden understood all of it. And it goes to show you that when you have someone at the top of the pyramid who is essentially demented and out of it, and you have people below him who all have their own fiefdoms and they all have their own worlds that they run. Jill Biden, certainly Ron Klain would be one of them. Susan Rice would be another. This is a government and this is a party that's being run by committee. And if you've ever done anything, whether it be business or a civic group or a church group or whatever, that's run by committee and there's not one person at the top who's making the calls, it's always going to result in chaos. And that's what we have right now from a White House that sold confidence during the election. He said he would bring us back to normalcy. We wouldn't have the midnight tweets and we wouldn't have all of the things associated with the Trump administration that his voters wanted to move on from. But we've seen nothing but that, and they have no way to right the ship.
Such a good point. So good. And that moment was so interesting because it was obvious that no one's ever told him what "Let's Go Brandon" means. He's never heard that before, which says a lot. Now, when you say rule by committee, to me, I hear that and I think, okay, well, they're going to be ineffective at what they're trying to do. So which is it? Is it they're ineffective and inept and nothing will occur, or are they like these grand Marxist masterminds that are going to implement the dystopian future that we're afraid of? Can it be both, or does it have to be one or the other?
No, I think they're just ineffective. You look at when they've been successful. They were successful with the infrastructure bill. They were successful at getting that through. They're successful at getting their judges through. They've been doing that at a rapid clip. The most valuable player on that side is Nancy Pelosi. When they need votes in the Congress for infrastructure or Build Back Better or whatever the case may be, they essentially turn the operation over to her. And she's the one that makes it happen. When they were trying to whip up votes for that legislation, Biden would go talk to the Democratic caucus and he would get confused and didn't know what it was that he was supposed to be doing. And he gave all of the progressives the indication that it would be okay for them to vote no, which was the exact opposite thing that he was supposed to do. But the wires got crossed and Pelosi had to go clean up his mess. If the Democrats get their clocks cleaned in the midterms, like all the polls indicate that they will, one of the byproducts of that is she will get knocked out. She's not going to be the minority leader at 80 some odd years of age. She'll go back to San Francisco and retire. And without her, that operation falls apart. As difficult as it is for so many Republicans to understand, she is their most valuable player. Everything that she's bad at happens on camera. Everything that she's good at happens behind closed doors. You don't see Nancy Pelosi as the effective leader in the Congress, but that's what she is in that world. If you knock her out, they have zero chance at enacting any of their agenda the last 2 years of his term.
Wow, great news. All right, let's talk about the future of the Democrats when it comes to Kamala. We were just doing a little hypothetical earlier that what if the vice president was someone who was like great and impressive and smart and people loved, and that would be a very different dynamic for the Democrats. But if there's anyone that people dislike more than Joe Biden, it's Kamala Harris. So what do the Democrats do with her?
They're in a tough spot with her because according to the USA Today poll, her approval rating was 28%, which is somewhere in between Delta and Omicron. And that isn't going to change anytime soon, but this is who she is. And this is part of the reason why so many people in the Washington, D.C. and New York bubble treat California as if we are a suburb of Guam. And they pay no attention to what goes on here. But everything that you're seeing, all of her deficiencies that you're seeing play out on the national stage right now, played out in California first. She wouldn't do the interviews. She wouldn't go on the shows. And when she would, she was ill prepared. Or she'd say, my staff will get back to you with the answer. I have a good friend who covered her campaign for U.S. Senate. She never had answers to any of the questions. It was always, my staff will get back to you. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. When she engaged herself in the border, it would be these grandiose meetings that she would have, where she would meet with all of these attorneys and say that children seeking asylum on the border needed legal representation. And she would write press releases and generate headlines, but that's all it was. It was fluff. There was nothing behind it. The one policy thing that she did in California was hyper political. When she was Attorney General, she would skew the title and summary of all the ballot initiatives so that she would trick voters into voting the way she wanted them to vote and voting against the ones that she wanted to fail. But that was her portfolio. That was it. And if you were paying attention in California, you understood that this was an ill-prepared woman who was not up to the office. It's one of the reasons that Willie Brown, her mentor, went public and said that she shouldn't accept the vice presidency because it would be a disaster. No one paid attention to him either. This isn't a surprise to anyone who paid attention to her in California. And apparently it is a surprise to the Biden people because they didn't know that that's who she was.
Wow. What is it about her? Because I remember reading one of the articles recently about how terrible it is to work for her, and that's she doesn't prepare, and then she yells at her staffers for being unprepared in the moment, right? What is that?
Yeah, there's a guy by the name of Gil Duran, who is the editor of a paper up in San Francisco. I think it's a San Francisco Examiner. And before he became a journalist, he worked in Democratic Party politics, surprise, surprise. And one of his bosses was Kamala Harris back when she was the Attorney General of California. And he writes extensively about what a horrible boss she was and about how all of the problems that you're seeing in the vice presidency existed in that office. The staff hated their jobs. They knew that she didn't have their back. They knew that she would throw them under the bus the minute she looked bad publicly. And that's part of the reason why no one in her office has loyalty to her. The negative stories about Kamala Harris aren't coming from the conservative media. Who's doing negative stories about her? It's CNN. It's the Washington Post. It's liberal newspapers and liberal networks. Why? Because the stories are all coming from within her office or from within the Biden White House. The Biden people don't trust her. Jill Biden doesn't trust her. The people who work for her don't trust her. And you can't operate in that world where no one who works for you is looking out for you. Right now, she is swimming in shark-infested waters, and at some point, the shark is going to eat you.
So if one is a Democratic operative, you can't kick Biden to the curb because she's the number two. So how do you kick the dementia patient out and the inept vice president? What do you do for these next 3 years and then in 2024?
Well, you can't because it's mutually assured destruction. So they can't publicly turn on one another. It's all has to be passive aggressive, not overtly aggressive. And the ace in the hole that she has to protect herself against Biden removing her from office or Biden trying to put her on the Supreme Court to get her out of the way or something along those lines, or Hillary Clinton jumping in the race and declaring herself to be a candidate. She can go public and say, listen, I deal with Joe on a daily basis. I see what he's like on the inside. This guy has lost his marbles. It's time for him to go. That's the power that she has. And that's the stick of dynamite that she can light on fire if and when she thinks they're trying to put a horse's head in her bed. So they have to be very careful with how they treat her, because she can do that if she chooses to do that. And people will pay attention to her. She is the vice president. She does see him on a daily basis. And if she says he's out of it and incapable of performing the duties, there's going to be a certain segment of the population that's going to pay very close attention to that.
Wow. Okay, who's the third person in line then, if not either of these two, as the future of the Democratic Party?
Well, you have Hillary Clinton waiting in the wings. So,
Amazing. Is that for real? Like, do you really think so?
Well, I mean, we'll know she's running if we find Ghislaine Maxwell hanging on her cell. But you look at this, the next crop of people below her, and they're all imploding themselves. I mean, Andrew Cuomo was supposed to be the one. He was the one that had all the glowing profiles written about him. That's clearly not going to happen. You look at the also-rans in the last Democratic primary. Bernie Sanders is 912 years old. It's not going to be him. Eric Swalwell is diddling Chinese spies. You know, it was nice knowing you. Amy Klobuchar had Minneapolis burned to the ground, and she's toxic in that world. I don't know who the next generation of Democratic candidates, I don't know who they are. I don't know where they're going to come from. They're in a real bind right now.
Yeah, it's got to be Newsom, though, right?
Well, you can't have two candidates from the same state, constitutionally. You can't have one as the president, one as the vice president. They have to come from different states.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then realistically, he has the same donor base as her. They come from the same political machine in San Francisco.
Yeah.
His political career got started because of Willie Brown. Willie Brown appointed him to be a member of the Board of Supervisors up there. Willie Brown greased the skids for Kamala Harris to be elected district attorney there. So they're going to go to the same donors. They're going to go to the same benefactors. They're going to go to the same people for endorsements. You can't have two credible operations come from the same world. So it's going to be one or the other. And as long as she's around, he is aced out.
Very interesting. Okay, I would say, don't you think the donors will go with him, though? Does he clearly have a better future than Kamala?
Well, if they do that, what's she going to do? She's going to call them a bunch of sexists and racists. And if you're in San Francisco, or you're a tech executive in Atherton, and you have the vice president saying that you're siding with the white guy over her because you're a sexist and a racist, that is not going to be good news for you.
They're in such a bad spot. We got to run, babe. Who are you watching on the Republican side?
Oh, I think Trump's running again. I think there's no question about that. I was just at an event in Mar-a-Lago, and he appeared. He wasn't on the card, but he showed up. And that room just exploded when he's there. If he chooses not to run, I think DeSantis certainly has the wind at his back because Florida's done so well all through the pandemic. But I just think that Trump is absolutely in again.
Wow. Well, we will cross that bridge. John Phillips, KABC, Orange County Register. You're the man, John. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Josh Hammer coming up next. We'll talk about the social credit system that is in other countries around the world and coming here. It depends if you want it, America. It's next. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Cider Crusaders, welcome back to our special Biden's uphill climb for the upcoming 2022 midterms here. I want to talk a little more about policy, right? Last segment, we were talking more about the personalities. Let's talk about policy in this segment. I think this is the most important thing that's coming in our country. It already exists in places around the world. We'll get to that. I think it's the most important thing that's getting the least attention. And it must be stopped. If for no other reason, and there's many reasons to vote properly this coming election, for me, this will be the big one. It's to prevent this from happening. This is Dr. Malone on Joe Rogan's podcast the other day.
Do you remember back a couple of years ago when you felt sorry for the people in the People's Republic of China because their internet was filtered? They weren't allowed free speech. Their government told them what to do and think. Okay? Now, here we are. Okay? And the next thing that we all feel sorry about is social credit system. Okay? Wake up, folks.
Wake up. It's coming.
Imagine in the very near future, your social credit score just went down a few points because you watched that clip. How dare you download the Joe Rogan podcast, listen to the Mike Slater Show, and follow Josh Hammer, Newsweek opinion editor and syndicated columnist. Josh, thanks for being here, brother. You wrote a great piece the other day that's becoming more and more relevant every day, unfortunately, called The Social Credit Security State. And you start off talking about how, Reagan's famous words, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. But you've added to that, you've changed it a little bit. I'm from the ruling class, and I'm here to help. Let's define our terms here. What is this ruling class we need to be aware of?
Sure. So thanks for having me back on, Mike. So the ruling class, which is kind of a phrase that I think in the modern discourse kind of originated with the writings of the late, great Angelo Codevilla, who had this fabulous essay back in 2010. I think it was for the American Spectator, kind of just talking about what he referred to as the ruling class. And what kind of made Angelo's terminology, his phraseology stand out is that kind of the rhetoric, the nomenclature of class is historically kind of more at home on the left, right? Kind of when we talk about class, we kind of more intrinsically think about, Marxism, obviously, and all the various kind of evil ideologies that Marxism has spun off. But I think what Angelo very presciently saw was that there was kind of this rise of kind of like a unibrow, kind of unipolar class of people that holds largely similar beliefs that are kind of neoliberal, kind of deregulatory on matters of economics, and similarly kind of deregulatory on matters of culture. This is kind of that classic kind of socially liberal, kind of fiscally centrist kind of people that we hear about. So the ruling class, which I use kind of synonymously to kind of, some people refer to this as the PMC, the professional managerial class. My friend Sohrab Ahmari, formerly of the New York Post, refers to as kind of the Davos class, the laptop class. These are the people for whom social liberalism, kind of when we deregulate the culture, when we kind of do a free-for-all kind of no virtue order, all this thrown out the window, that they're going to be fine, okay? Because they've got their gated community, they've got their armed security guards, they're lawyers, bankers, whatever. They can work from home from the comforts of their private security guards on a laptop. This is the ruling class. And it doesn't particularly matter whether they identify as an R or a D as far as a partisan label at the end of the name, because they ultimately are subscribing to the same ideology. And that ideology, I would argue, and I think many would argue, is fundamentally at odds with the best interests of the median American, kind of the quintessential deplorable, if you will, in the heartland.
So good. I love this concept of deregulating culture. My brain can't quite make sense. Help me put this into the proper box. What does that mean, deregulating culture, and how are they the same people who want to deregulate things in the economy? Help me understand that.
So to be clear, they're not always the same, obviously. But when I talk about kind of, Ross Douthat, the New York Times columnist, who has a very popular Substack now as well, he's kind of been prolific writing about this for years and years and years here. If you kind of go back and look at kind of, the 1960s, obviously, with kind of the advent of the sexual revolution and the pill and kind of, carefree, guilt-free sex proliferating on the college campus. A lot of this kind of has its origins, really kind of, if you go back far enough, I would argue, in kind of Bolshevik, kind of Soviet-era social theory. Actually, the Bolsheviks back at the time of the Russian Revolution, 1917, 1918, they were actually the first ones who kind of formulated the idea of no-fault divorce. No-fault divorce is literally a Bolshevik, Soviet, Leninist idea. And the idea here, obviously, which is kind of a classic kind of left-wing kind of idea, is to erode the family, to erode kind of the order and the stabilizing institutions that Tocqueville and Burke rightly saw as the institutions of mediating society. Because if you kind of want government to get in there and ultimately subjugate the people, it all begins by breaking down the family, breaking down religion. That's why Marx obviously referred to religion as the opiate of the masses and things like that here. So to be clear, not everyone who believes that kind of stuff necessarily believes in what we would refer to as kind of neoliberalism as a matter of kind of economic theory. But oftentimes, the people at the top of the economic ladder who have pushed the former oftentimes have pushed the latter when it comes to things like quote-unquote free trade with China, like China being ascended to the World Trade Organization. These two things oftentimes are two sides of the same coin, which is why I think in a lot of parts of the right, you're seeing kind of a more populist backlash, right? The rise of Senate candidates like Blake Masters and J.D. Vance, who talk kind of over and over again about not just undoing this horrific kind of social progressivism, but also trying to roll back some of the excesses of kind of neoliberalism and globalism itself.
Let me bring in a third side of the coin. So if we're talking about these type of people, how do these type of people also support a social credit system, which is ultimate control and manipulation of everyone else? How do those jive?
So the ruling class, as I think about it, as I kind of formulated, as I've talked about it in this essay that you alluded to, Mike, and kind of some of my other columns here, the ruling class it's multi-institutional. It is society sprawling, and it kind of exists all across the American system. It's both inside and outside of government. It's kind of in the deep state, it's in the intelligence communities, in the bowels of junior level staffers of Congress. And it obviously also kind of is in the Fortune 500. It is in the C-suite. It is in the public school education bureaucracies. Obviously, Chris Rufo has done just some incredible work on the latter 2 points, exposing the intellectual rot that exists in so much of corporate America and in kind of our public school infrastructure as well, all across the country here. And this mentality really is that it is a fundamentally illiberal mentality. Wesley Yang, the essayist, has referred to this as the, quote, successor ideology. It really is what we would identify as wokeism. It's illiberal. It is a leftist brand of illiberalism that basically says that what I believe is the only way to view this issue, and you will be made to shut up and bow before me, and your opinion doesn't matter. And by the way, you won't even have a voice to begin with because we want to get you out of the public square. That is, that's kind of where the big tech censorship oligarchs kind of come in, right? So this mentality in the specific context of the modern Social Security state that is emerging here, when my governor here in Florida, Ron DeSantis, I think has accurately referred to as the quote unquote biomedical security state. What's happening here is that the regime, kind of like the uniparty kind of ruling class regime, due to the success of Operation Warp Speed, I think has seen that the vaccine is kind of the quintessential achievement of the regime. It is put out there as this incredible achievement here, and to dissent, to point out that the vaccine doesn't actually work as well as we were told it would work, that doesn't prevent the spread of COVID, that the vaccinated and the unvaccinated are both spreading COVID at like roughly proportional rates to one another. To even say that is to question the regime's ultimate authority, which is why obviously, Robert Malone is kicked off of Twitter and all this other crazy stuff as far as the censorship regime kicking into place here. So the ruling class, I think, especially due to kind of the now infinite flip-flops of people like Anthony Fauci, Deborah Birx, and the entire public health apparatus, they feel vulnerable. They know that there's kind of like a rising tide of animus, of frustration with their highly fluctuating and vacillating diktats. Their rule, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And they have decided not to engage us in good faith, but to try to just get us out of the public square. And that is kind of where that's where the ship is sailing. It's not going towards a particularly good spot right now. Mike, we've both seen the videos of New York City, NYPD cops going into these stores to forcibly kick people out for not having their cards presented for being properly vaxxed. When we in a society head towards a two-tier system, we are having like a physical card, in this case, obviously, that you were quote unquote properly vaxxed. We are heading towards a place where you need that kind of card to gain access to basic civil society services. That historically has not ended well. And I don't want us to get there, but that's where we're going.
Yes, and the two-tier system right now is based off of the vaxxed, unvaxxed, but I think we're just laying the groundwork for whatever delineation they want to make in people coming, right? So that leads me to the England, and I'm reading this from the UK's UK.gov website. I'm not making this up. This isn't like future concepts either. This is what's happening right now. That your COVID passport includes your racial and ethnic origin, your political opinions, religious and philosophical beliefs, your whatever that is, and whyever that is, trade union membership, data concerning a natural person's sex life or sexual orientation, information regarding or relating to the individual's physical or mental health condition, individuals' lifestyles and social circumstances, whatever that is, and criminal convictions or alleged criminal behavior is all included in the COVID passport in England. Why and where do you see the very near dystopian future with this type of device?
It's not good. Alleged criminal behavior in particular, there's a word for this. British folks of all people should be familiar with it. The word obviously is Orwellian to describe that kind of stuff. When I see the phrase alleged criminal behavior, I'm literally thinking here about thought crimes, right? About dissenting from the regime's orthodoxy on anything public health or vaccine related. But as you rightfully note, Mike, we're starting here with the vaccine. There's no reason that we're necessarily going to end there. Look, I mean, it's really sad, obviously. I'm somewhat of an Anglophile by nature. I did a college semester abroad studying in London. I'm a student of Edmund Burke's. I'm an admirer of the English common law tradition. They've given so much to the world as kind of a matter of governance, of liberty, of constitutional structure. They've given us so much. And my view, honestly, of the U.S. Constitution is actually heavily informed by the fact that we inherited so much of it from the Brits. So the Brits really should know more than anyone else that this does not end in particularly good places there. But look, I mean, historically speaking, honestly, what starts in Europe as a matter of kind of these policies ultimately makes it to America. We're on like a 5 to 10, maybe 15, 20-year lag time at the most. Socialized medicine obviously is one prime example of that. The Democratic Party here kind of got in lockstep on like socialized medicine, quote unquote, Medicare for all, in a roughly 15-year at the most kind of a time frame after most countries in Europe started adopting that. So what you see there happening in London and the broader UK, it's coming here. And the Biden administration has basically said that. I mean, they have released many documents now. There was that absolutely appalling White House press conference. Jeffrey Zients, I think was the guy who was giving it. It was like a press conference of sorts, where he basically said this winter is going to be a winter of death and despair for the unvaccinated. And he basically said it's your own damn fault. So we're almost there already, and we're going to get to where the UK is probably quite soon.
Yep. 30 seconds. What is your assessment of the current state of the Democratic Party now leading up to 2022 election?
Well, I think, I checked the Real Clear Politics average this morning before we came on, Mike. It looks like Biden is about 11.5 points underwater in the Real Clear Politics average as far as his job approval rating. Look, historically, the first midterm election is always a blowback against the incumbent party. The Democrats, I think, are basically screwed. Unless Republicans epically drop the ball, they will retake the House, they will retake the Senate. It will be a good midterm election. I feel fairly confident saying for the Republicans.
And who's on the bench for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party moving forward?
Democrats, I literally have no idea. I think they were hoping I think they were hoping it would be Gavin Newsom, but I mean, he's not exactly the most popular figure. Maybe Gretchen Whitmer. I mean, she's not exactly popular herself, honestly. Pete Buttigieg is like literally the one person who comes to mind is like maybe running. I mean, Kamala is as unpopular as HIV, obviously, so there's no reason that she would get it. On the R side, I mean, look, for the presidency, I mean, everything that I'm hearing is that Trump wants to run again. So as of now, I think no one serious challenges him if he wants to do that. But if he decides not to run, it's got to be the governor of my state. It's got to be Ron DeSantis, I would think.
Yep. I dig it. Josh Hammer, we could talk forever, man. Grateful for you. Newsweek opinion editor and syndicated columnist. You'll see him everywhere. Josh, appreciate you, man.
Thanks so much.
Have a good day. Coming up next, I got 2 metaphors to share about being ungovernable. Because we have to stop that social credit score from coming here. And the only way you do it is by being ungovernable. Talk about that next. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special America 2022, Biden's uphill battle. 2 amazing guests today. Grateful for John and Josh. I have 2 metaphors that I want to end the show with today. The first one is about not being naive. And let's make a resolution to not be tricked this year. To have a not cynical, but sober assessment of reality. And a sober and accurate assessment of human nature. And who these people are who are in charge of our country. Don't be naive. Don't ever be tricked again. So I got an example here of some naivete. Check out this lion at the zoo, clawing at the glass with a 1-year-old there. And the parents are taking video of this, and they're talking about how cute it is and all the rest. And the caption to this is in the Sun. The caption is, "Lioness is eager to play with toddler who looks like a zebra." Play? Eat. The lion wants to eat the toddler, not play with it. Eat it. And I think that's such a good metaphor for people who don't want to see the truth. How can you look at that video and think, oh, how fun. Isn't that great? Look at it. They just want to play. The lion just wants to play. No. Well, how can you be so naive? And I think it's the same kind of mindset, the same kind of people who look at the pharmaceutical industry and say, oh, they just want to help people. They're so kind, the pharmaceutical industries. They're so wonderful, so kind. No, they want to eat you. Not eat you, but you see the metaphor breaks down eventually. But they want your money. We can't, like, I'm just amazed still at how people are so naive about it all, right? So naive about our politicians. Do you think our politicians are here to help you? You still think that's the thing they do? You think the pharmaceutical company is here to keep you healthy? You think the media is here to inform you? No, they're lions and they want to eat you. Stop trusting them with anything. Stop thinking the best of them. Stop thinking they're cute or have your best interest at heart. I heard a great piece of advice. It was advice for dads that they should give to their sons. And the line was, your freedom begins the day you realize that nobody is coming to save you. Your freedom begins the day you realize nobody is coming to save you. Similarly, your freedom begins when you realize that these people are out to get you. Or at best, perhaps that's a little too much for you, at best, these people are only out there to serve themselves, no matter what it means for you. Second metaphor. This is a picture of leaves from the same tree. A holly, just a common holly. Those are both the same. Why is one smooth and one sharp? Well, the theory is that when a deer or some other animal eats the leaves, eats the holly leaves, the leaves, they start like they're on the left, smooth, and then they grow back spiky, so as to not get eaten again. As George Bush said, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, can't fool me again. So this is why you can have a holly bush where way up high, the leaves are smooth, but down lower where the deer can get at it, the leaves are all prickly and sharp. Acacia trees are similarly amazing. When a giraffe eats the leaves of the acacia tree, the leaves release tannins. It's like this chemical that somehow gets released into the air and then gets sent by the wind to the other nearby acacia trees, who then release their own tannins, which makes the leaves taste gross, and it messes up the giraffe's digestive tract so that the giraffes don't eat the leaves anymore. Like, what? It's unbelievable. How, like, what is that? How is that possible? This is why whenever you see giraffes eating on acacia trees, they're always upwind, right? Amazing that the trees can talk to each other like that. But to me, it just shows how resilient these plants are. I wonder, are we that resilient? We human beings, Americans. I think right now we are the plant leaf that gets eaten and grows back just as stupid as before, just as insecure, just as naive as before, just as unprotected. Oh, that deer just wants to kiss me. It doesn't want to eat me. It just wants to play. Enough of that. We've been punched in the gut in America for 2 years now. There's no question about it. And we need to grow back ungovernable. I love this term, ungovernable. We need to grow back sharp like the holly leaves. Check out these videos here. These are videos of skylines in different cities in Europe. Naples, this one's Naples. So another city in the Netherlands. Right? So the deal is, the mayors of these cities banned firework displays. Right? They weren't gonna have any big, massive firework display because they didn't want people to gather in one location, right? So like no fireworks this year. So this is how people in these cities responded. Like that's like the ultimate up yours, isn't it? Isn't that amazing? Like fireworks everywhere. That's awesome. That's being ungovernable. Where's that in America? That is classic civil disobedience. I love everything about it. Whatever happened to that type of response here in America? Don't even get me started on New York City. I'm most disappointed in you, New Yorkers. Of all the cities where the people should have said, up yours, to every politician telling them what to do, it should have been you. You get the mayor of Minneapolis comes in and says, hey, Minneapolis, we need you guys to lock down and vaccine passports. Then, Minnesota nice, the people are like, oh, okay, no problem. But you do that in New York City, the mayor of New York City comes in, hey, you guys need a vaccine passport. Like, get out of here. You're tired, need a passport to go eat at a restaurant. Are you kidding me? And the New Yorkers are like, oh, sure, whatever, no problem, de Blasio. What are you doing with New York? We need to become ungovernable by these tyrants. Grow back like the holly leaves so they can't pull the same tricks on you over and over again. Grow back so they don't even try, because you know your history. You know human nature. You know the evil intentions of man. You know that lion is not there to play with you, and that this deer is not coming to give you a sweet kiss. They're here to eat you. React accordingly. I think this election can't come soon enough. No question. But to fight the fight to save this country is every day. I'm so grateful you're here for it. Mike Slater, spread the word.